Thank you so much to our speakers coming into us, and I suppose for the NCCA, I mean, it truly is a representative body, you know, I suppose for teachers' unions, for parents, you know, and you have nominees, I know, on your group as well. And I suppose for the State Examinations Committee and Commission, I mean, it's a standalone body. I mean, it reports directly to the Minister. I very much see an advisory group here, you know, working with subject experts. And from what I understand, there's a nominee from the SEC that also sits on the NCCA. So I think that's very important. Again, just to admire, I suppose, the work that's been completed in a very difficult time, particularly, I suppose, around the SEC. What you've done in the last 2 years, I mean, particularly for your assessors in managing and working with, I suppose, teaching groups to manage the continuous assessment and accredited grade system and so on that we've put in place over the last couple of years. There's a couple of questions, and I'm just conscious of time as well, but also to say I was incredibly impressed with 40-odd subjects that are now managed by the SEC and assessors. That is absolutely incredible. I saw that 4 extra languages were added for 2022, you know, Mandarin, Chinese, Lithuanian. Incredible to see that. So I really do pay tribute to the broad range of subjects to accommodate, I suppose, new communities coming to Ireland as well. Just in terms of questions, in terms of the assessment, along the lines of the digital side and technology, so I understand that perhaps marks are put into, you know, are added online, and that's what's reviewed, and then that's going to be made available to students, and there'll be sort of a portal where it's transparently available to students. But very much so, would we not be moving to a system where students are going to be, you know, inputting their information online? And when do we see that happening? And then what is the cybersecurity maybe elements around that? And is there a portion of budgets within Department of Education that would need to be allocated for that? I suppose my other questions range around the timelines for assessment. I mean, some of the concerns and challenges we had in the last 2 years was with this new system was the timing of the assessments or the markings that came out, you know, the results that came out. So in other words, that had an impact for third level, and particularly for students that were going to the UK. How are we going to manage that this year? And also with this new model of continuous assessment, how are we going to manage in terms of making sure that that marking happens in a timely way for our third level students that do wish to either take up courses in Europe or the UK or internationally? Also mindfulness in an exam setting. Like we're seeing a third level, NUI Galway, first university with mindfulness. How can we look? We're talking about it. We talk an awful lot about mindfulness and well-being, but where are the actions? How can we see it in an exam setting where students come in a pure panic mode at times? I remember what I was like, and you'd be cramming up until God knows what hour, coming into an exam. How do you get them to switch off, to detox or whatever it is, and suddenly, you know, calm down and engage with the exam? What sort of methods could we look at? Then for the NCCA, just if we have time, just again to acknowledge again, thank you so much. The reports that you've done over the last number of years, the way that you've engaged at different levels, at different stages with schools and with parents, it's incredible. There's a huge mountain of work done there. It's now led to this continuous assessment, so important when it comes to Dutch students and special needs in particular. You have extra courses, drama and film, and of course climate action, looking at our current global challenges. I do understand the concerns around the assessment and capacity of students, but just around the expansion of the transition year, we're looking at apprenticeship taster courses. How many of those would you recommend? Secondly, just on the pilot network schools, again, you've mentioned that's been rolled out, it's going to be launched and network schools can apply for this. Will there be a regional mix? So in other words, with the schools that have been selected, that it will have a regional mix? And then also, is there a maximum number of schools that will take place? In terms of international practice and comparison with other countries, was there one or two elements that you saw in other countries that you think would be something for the future that we should consider? So I'll leave it with you, and apologies, probably about 2.5 minutes each. Andrea, I'll start with you and maybe your team if they want to join in, and then we'll pass over to Arlene. Thank you.
Okay, before we just Deputy O'Connell is next, because in fairness, I should have called him before you, Senator, because he was here at the start of the meeting. My apologies, but we'll go back to the witnesses.
And thank you, Senator, for the very thoughtful questions. I might start with the mindfulness one first, because it's probably the quickest from my perspective to deal with. Yeah. I know colleagues in the National Education and Psychological Service are doing a huge amount of work working with schools in relation to mindfulness and well-being. In terms of in the examination setting, what happens? Yeah. So our superintendents are teachers. So they're used to dealing with young people, and they're used to dealing with not just the mechanics of delivery of the examinations, but actually engaging with young people in that setting. So if a student, is having a difficulty on the day, we have experienced people there on hand in the examination centre, but also available to them in the school. In relation to the other issues then, the technology issue that you've raised, we're using a huge amount of technology, and it's really stood to us over the last 2 years when we were able to deliver calculated grades and accredited grades because we had built up capacity in relation to online marking, but also use of the candidate self-service portal over the last couple of years has been phenomenal and gives students immediate access to a lot of information, not only their results, but subsequently the data about the marks that they got. For this year, we have almost all of our Leaving Certificate subjects marked online, and that will mean when it comes to the viewing of scripts later on in the year after the results come out, that students will have access to almost their Leaving Certificate scripts, almost all of them available online.
Great.
So that's, a real development. And I made the point in the opening statement that we're using a huge amount of technology in the delivery of what we do, supporting assessment, but not actually doing the assessment. I think the question that you were coming at, and international research has shown that there are not a huge number of high-stakes examination systems that make great use of online assessment. And there are very practical reasons, and it's not just availability of computers, it can be availability of plug points in schools. So very practical reasons why you need to have the seat time. If we're arranging for 120,000 students to sit down in June to sit an English exam, they all have to be able to sit that English exam. At that time, the devices need to be there, the electricity needs to be there. So within the announcement on the senior cycle, the expansion of ICT in relation to examination and assessment has been included within the reform announcement, and we have been asked together with the NCCA to research that, to explore that. And there is a recognition, however, that needs to be tied into the digital strategy for schools.
I think that if we're looking to the future and we want to prepare our children and our students for the future, it is about having access to technology.
Yes.
And I would very much say that, students and young people are very, you're seeing like Microsoft Schools, for example. You're seeing that at national school level. I just do think that we have to move quickly on this and make sure that our students are prepared. But sorry, go ahead, Arlene.
And I was going to say, we have met,
Andrea.
so in New Zealand, the New Zealand Qualifications Authority are one of the forerunners on this. They're kind of pioneers in terms of assessment, and we have met with them to explore with them what it is that they're doing, and they're doing it in a small scale because of those practical considerations. But I mean, there are things that could be considered, things like bring your own device, but again, you're looking at the security. So if a student is doing an exam and they can get onto the web while they're doing that exam, then it doesn't do an awful lot in terms of fairness and integrity. So there are things that we need to explore. But research into that is included within the senior cycle reform announcement.
And just the timelines on assessment, sorry, just very quickly. Yeah,
the timelines for assessment. So this year, we haven't announced yet. So the date for the results in the last 2 years has been end August, early September. And that's because of the challenges that we've had over the last couple of years. The date for the results this year will be impacted by two things. So an announcement has been made in relation to the overall profile of results being no lower than the profile of results in 2021. That requires time for analysis. So after all of the marking is done, we'll need to do the analytics required to make sure that we're going to do that.
Okay.
And the second is the announcement in relation to a deferred sitting of the examinations for students who are bereaved, seriously ill, and suffering from COVID and unable to take their examinations. So there'll be a deferred series of examinations.
But I suppose, can we give confidence to the students who would want to take up their studies in the UK that they will receive their results in a timely way this year? So
again, in the last 2 years, even though the results have been delayed, those students have had their places available to them, and an awful lot of work has gone on behind the scenes, themselves with the department, and that will be the same this year.
That's great. Thank you so much. That's really good to hear. And sorry, I don't know if there's a quick second to reply. Sorry. Thank you, Arlene.
Thanks, Senator. And I suppose firstly, just thank you for your points about the review itself, which we appreciate. I suppose very quickly, starting with you highlighted the two new subjects that the Minister has asked us to develop, which we already are beginning work on. But what I would add as well is in the advisory report there is an acknowledgement that there may very well be other subjects, other modules or units that we will need to develop, and we've already, I suppose, identified the fact that young people do need more opportunities in the technical and vocational and professional areas in particular. So we have an audit underway that will assist us in identifying maybe what are the other subjects or modules that we need to look at. In terms of the pilot network schools, we haven't, I suppose, we haven't gotten into the detail yet of what this network would include, but I suppose what I would say very importantly is, and this is a characteristic of any networks with which NCCA works, we ensure that they are representative of the different school contexts, the diversity of school contexts that make up, in this case, obviously post-primary education, and that would be really important given the work that these network schools would be involved in. And it is our experience that when we put the emphasis on that representation, it invariably gives us regional representation as well.
So outside of urban areas.
Sorry?
Outside of urban areas.
Outside of urban areas as well,
okay.
yes.
Thank you.
In terms of international practice and your question about maybe particular elements that struck us that might be of particular maybe importance in terms of our work on senior cycle, there were a number of these, but what I might do is I might just draw attention to some that we haven't maybe spoken about in the meeting today yet. I suppose one of the features that we saw in our look at international practice was this greater diversification in upper secondary, and in particular the fact that many jurisdictions have very clearly defined vocational pathways. So I think that there is learning there for us in redeveloping senior cycle. Another area that is I suppose very prominent in other jurisdictions is the whole area of broader reporting. And we capture this in the advisory report as well. So in Ireland, as you know, I mean, reporting very much focuses on a young person's examination results. And in the discussions during the senior cycle review, there was time given to thinking about the value of having broader reporting. So taking account of other experiences that young people might have, including transition year and their 2 years leading towards the Leaving Cert itself. Another area, I suppose, that came up for us in the review of international practice was around, I suppose, on the one hand, where systems, I suppose, encourage and support greater specialisation in terms of the subjects or the modules or and ultimately the curriculum components that a young person would choose. But alongside that, a continuing emphasis on literacy and numeracy and the importance, I suppose, attached to those. And you see that reflected in our own system, even currently. And I suppose a final one I would draw attention to is a lot of other jurisdictions, I suppose, look to a greater diversity of learning environments for young people at this particular stage of their education. So, for example, you know, some systems, I suppose, have much greater emphasis than we have currently on building partnerships with local businesses, you know, organisations in the voluntary sector, for example. And then there's the online learning bit that we've mentioned already. So there's just some of the things that I suppose came up in our review. And apologies for the speed through all of that.
But if you feel free to email us as well as the committee, just with any other further responses. I'm just conscious of the Deputy's time here as well. Thank you so much.
Okay.